Hello and welcome back to In Comics, a show where an ABKS, that is, American-born Korean speaker, provides English language reviews of Korean language webtoons and comics. And the comic I want to review for you today is called Kalkan and Sonyo, which literally translates to The Girl Going for a Knife. The title of the English translated version of this webtoon is Knife in Her Heart. It is published by Naver Webtoon in South Korea, and in the US it is available on the US version of the Webtoon app. The author is Ori, who to my knowledge has not produced any other webtoon for Naver, although I do not know if she has produced anything else for any other webtoon publications. The current status of the webtoon is technically completed. It has about 205 episodes plus a few episodes of Wejeon. The final episode of the Wejeon just came out about a few days ago, so technically it hasn't been marked as status completed yet on the Naver app, but there are basically no more episodes to come out. And as far as the English version goes, about 120 so episodes have already been translated, and it's currently ongoing with weekly publications on the Webtoon app in the US. In terms of my reading status, I am technically completed with the webtoon. I finished every single episode up into the Majimakwa. I have not completed all of the Wejeons yet, but I think it's safe to say that I've completed the entire main storyline of Kalkan and Sonyo. This webtoon began publication in 2019 in South Korea, and the US translated version of it started publishing in 2023. I began reading it in 2020, and so I came in about 50, 60 episodes into publication. I've been following it more or less weekly ever since. This webtoon has been classified by Naver under the genres of drama, seongjang or growth, and girl crush, and it basically centers around two high school girls, Chae-sarang and Gu and-jo, who basically become friends because they are both dealing with their own deep sources of sadness and decide to band together to take revenge on the world that has caused their suffering. We have Sarang, who has had a rare terminal illness since young and gained fame and became the nation's sweetheart overnight after a documentary about her illness made her famous. And she is basically fed up because she feels that the people in charge of her are more interested in exploiting her illness rather than curing it. On the other hand, we have Eun-jo, who is her classmate and is currently raised in a single-parent household by a mother who has been neglecting her because she herself has been trapped in depression for years. And in seeing this, Eun-jo has taken it upon herself to never pursue happiness or take joy in anything out of the guilt that she would feel if she experienced happiness while her mother was so unhappy. And so that is a brief overview of the plot. Now we're going to move into section where to go over my own review of the webtoon. I'll be breaking into three categories: the characters, the storytelling, and the artwork. And so for characters, if I were to rate this on a scale of 1 to 5, I would give it a 4.5. This is actually a really, really good score. I think that the characters are fantastic in this. Just talking about the main characters, I think that it's a very original concept for a webtoon. I don't think I've ever read another comic where we start off with the main character is terminally ill and is so weak at the start. So that's really, really unique. I also think that the main characters are really, really well thought out and really believable and convincing. Like, I totally understand why, given everything surrounding these two girls and how they were brought up, how they became the people they are today. And so I think that those characters were really written really well. In terms of the secondary characters, I like that they also are properly given a good backstory to understand how they became who they became. Characters are not just evil overnight. You don't have a overbearing mother who becomes overbearing overnight. You don't have a neglectful parent who started off just always being irresponsible. You have a whole backstory to everybody. I think, for example, for one particular character, very soon into the plot, you get to meet Eun-jo's dad. So her parents are actually divorced, and then they give a very long arc to giving the backstory of really all of their families, Sarang's family and Eun-jo's family. And in the backstory of Eun-jo's family, it really just gives you the whole range of emotions, because when you see the characters and you see her parents, on the one hand, like, most people in the world cannot sympathize with the actions that Eun-jo's parents, particularly her father, takes. But you can, at the same time, you can totally see how this kind of person exists. Like, it's not a complete suspension of disbelief to see how someone can be so selfish and narcissistic, and how selfishness and narcissism could actually lead to a family going down the path that her family went to. And so I empathize entirely with the situation. And they're just like, this is so hard, but this is so real. And so I really appreciated that about the characters. And then even from not just the main characters and their parents, but their classmates, every relationship and every arc is really well thought out and gives you a full 3-dimensional picture of who these characters are, which I really love. And then on top of that, we talk about the relationships, particularly the relationship between our two mains, Sarang and Unjo. I think this is like top tier, like bromance, which I think I've almost never seen in any other story before. I think people talk a lot about like bromance and how like even like having two male characters who are so hooked together in their friendship is even sometimes greater than seeing a romantic relationship develop. And that's how I feel about Sarang and Unjo. The way that their friendship progresses into what blossoms from their friendship is so like, I watch that and I'm like, I want a friendship like that. When people tell you that, can you have a friendship that's so great that it's better than romance? I believe it when I see a relationship that grows like theirs. It's just hard to explain, but I think that it's one of the most well executed friendships between girls that I've ever seen. It's not even just their relationship is good, like the relationships between the two girls and the rest of their classmates and the friendships that are formed there, and family relationships that get resolved or renewed or like reconciled. It's really just like, it's like chef's kiss. Every time I watch it, I'm just like, wow, this is beautiful and it's well written. And so in general, the character, I have very little to complain about. I think they're doing a great job. Now I want to move on to storytelling. So for storytelling, I would start off by saying that I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5. It's still a very good rating. This, like I said before, this is considered as sangjang dramas, which means that it's about growth. Deal with people who are younger and like teenagers, high school age, because that's when you're growing up and you learn a lot of your life lessons for some reason. Some things I really like about the storytelling is that like romance is not a central plot line, which is so rare among teen webtoons or really any webtoon that's catered towards a female audience. That like it's not that like no one ever likes each other or develops feelings for each other, but it's like it's really not focused. They definitively decided this is going to be about friendships and family relationships, and they really stuck to that, and they did not allow any romantic feelings to dampen the impact of those other relationships really growing out fully. And then, can I just say, this is a tear jerker. I've experienced the full range of emotions while watching this webtoon. I have gotten so angry. I want to throw my phone across the room at characters. I've gotten so moved that I found myself crying while I'm reading these little panels and I'm scrolling through and there are tears falling down my eyes. And another thing that I want to really praise this story for and really praise this author for is that she has such a clever way of capturing these emotions. One example I'll give is there is this particular scene in which these two people are having like a moment where they're kind of reconciling, they're weeping in each other's arms. And like as a reader, you're already like starting to tear up and like, this is really beautiful. But then the next panel pans out to like while they're hugging and everything, there's a third character who has been there the whole scene and is sitting off at a bench on the side and watching this unfold. And then the next panel zooms into that character also crying as they're watching it. And that's when it's just like, oh. And the reason why that scene is so impactful is twofold. One is because like the audience is empathizing with this character who's watching from afar, because like this bystander is also you guys, is also the audience, and that's exactly how you're also feeling. But then also the second layer is that as you're actually seeing how this character reacted to what they're watching right now, you're also hit with a like, wow, what does this scene imply for the character who is actually watching this and is tearing up? And you get a whole nother wave of emotion, because like now I'm feeling something for these two characters who are having this moment, but I'm also feeling something for this character who was left on the bench for half of the episode. But you go back and you see her crying and you're like, wow, if this wasn't already an emotional moment, the added layer of how this emotional moment impacts the other characters heightens it. And so I think that this author does a really good job at that. There are tons of moments like that. There's going to be at least a handful of times when you're reading this and you either want to throw your phone across the room or you want to break down in tears and just start crying for them. In terms of other parts of the storytelling, I think pacing-wise, this is a 200 plus episode webtoon. I actually think it could have been longer. Not because the conclusion should have been dragged out any longer than it was, but because I wanted to see even more of what happens in their lives afterwards. Like, you get to the last episode, you get to the last like panel, and you're just like, oh, I want to know more. I don't think I'm ready to say goodbye to these characters. It's not that like anybody's storyline was left with loose ends. It was just that like I could keep hearing more about your life and I wouldn't be bored of it. And so I think it could have been a little longer, but I think overall the pacing itself was pretty good. Another thing I will say about the storyline is that it's really not predictable. There are a lot of mysteries that are like dragged out and I'm left wondering what happened to this person, or did they really do that for like many episodes on end? And that's like for better or worse, because it's like that question mark will stay in the back of my head and I'm sitting there pondering it and it doesn't get resolved for another 50 chapters. And so in that sense, I think it's great because it's not predictable at all. You can't immediately look at it and be like, oh, I know what this is about. I completely know where this character is coming from. And like, oh, I can guess. Like, I really couldn't guess. And that's why I was questioning for like so long. But then one really great thing about it is that there's none of those question marks remain at the very end of it. She does manage to answer every single question mark in the story eventually. Sometimes slower than I would have liked, though. And so the last part I want to talk about is the artwork. For this one, I would also give it a 4 out of 5 stars. I think that it is aesthetically amazing. In fact, honestly, I was originally drawn to this webtoon because the thumbnail for it was so beautiful. It was so ethereal and like celestial looking that I just assumed it was a fantasy webtoon. The kind of styling is very not realistic. It looked so fantastical that I thought that it was a fantasy. So then reading it, it's like, oh no, this is not what you thought it is at all. It's not a fantasy. It's really just a high school drama. Was surprising, but that's just a testament to how well she's drawn these characters. I also think that the art style particularly fits where the characters are at. For example, one thing you'll notice is that everyone in this webtoon tends to look kind of really emaciated. They're like super thin and like unnaturally thin, but that actually is not just like unrealistic beauty standards. That actually aligns with like the backstory of these characters. It's like you have a main character who is terminally ill and constantly in hospitals. Yeah, she's thin to the point that she looks sickly because she is. You have another character who is super stick thin. It's like, oh, why? Because she doesn't eat anything for joy, and so she eats very little because she doesn't want to enjoy food. And so it's actually like, wow, even these small details about the artwork reflect who the character's backstory, and so that's really nice. I think it's interesting because it's like very ethereal, but it's not realistic, because you look at the faces and the proportions are not realistic proportions. Everyone has really big eyes, and they have like a very cute facial proportion between from like the forehead to the chin, and even sometimes in cuter like small small moments, the author will switch to like a very chibi like art style where like they're suddenly very cute, and it's like the head to body ratio is 1:1, and so I think that's really cute and interesting about it. The artist plays a lot with natural lighting. Like in the thumbnails, you'll just see like the sun's coming in that way, or the blue skies and all that other stuff, which is very unique because a lot of webtoons, they'll like neglect the background. It'll just be a white background. It's all about the characters. It's all about that. But you see that like from scene to scene, the artist did a lot to actually think about the way the natural sunlight lights the face in certain situations and uses that to add to the aesthetic, almost as if they're producing like an actual film. So I really enjoy that about it as well. I think overall it's a cute, fun type of artwork. And so my overall rating of this is like somewhere between a 4 and a 4.5 out of 5 stars for this webtoon. I would say it's absolutely worth the read. If you haven't started reading it yet, definitely give it a try if these aren't the kind of plot lines that interest you, or the kind of characters that interest you. If you like growth, if you like emotional impact, if you are not so much into romance as you are into like other types of relationships, this is a great story for you. I say if you've already started reading it and you're wondering, should I continue on, as someone who's read the entire series, I'd say like, oh, it's still good. It doesn't like drop off at the end. I think it's consistently good all throughout, and it's a really good webtoon. And so with that, that is my review for Kaikan and Sonyo, Knife in Her Heart. If you like this review, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to hear more reviews from a webtoon reader who reads it in its original source language and then reviews it in a different one. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.